Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 32nd episode of the Absolute Game of Nerds. You may notice JP is not here today. So today, guest co-host, we have Mike from Lunch Money Comics. And we're have another great guest. We have Dinesh of Bad Idea Comics. And he's obviously got a big story that we're going to talk about. So Dinesh, how's it going? Say hi.
Good. I love this. I'm already a great guest. I've done nothing. It's all downhill for me.
I think the personal stories that we've heard of you, know of you, have make you a pretty big time guest for us. So
too much pressure.
Yeah. So Dinesh, we always start with basically just like your origin story with comics, comic related, the hobby, anything. Most of us started kind of in the 90s.
Yeah.
X-Men cartoons, that kind of thing. What's your origin story?
Yeah, I'm definitely a 90s kid. How did I start? I watched the Tim Burton Batman movie, the Christopher Reeve Superman movie, but that wasn't really comics. I don't know how many people had that experience, but didn't even understand comics as a thing at that point. It wasn't until I was in, I guess you call it junior high here. High school is just one long thing in the English system, and I grew up in Hong Kong. So I was in Hong Kong, high school. I probably was like 12 or 13, and a buddy of mine had some comic books. It's the first time I'd ever seen an actual comic book in person. I think I was aware of the concept, and he gave me one. He gave a bunch of his friends one comic each and said, "Hey, this is a gift for you. I love comics. You should check them out." It was Adventures of Superman 497, which is one of the Death of Superman Doomsday issues. Mm-hmm. And I read it. I loved it. I was a huge movie fan, big nerd. But comics have a completely different type of storytelling. We all know now it's become ubiquitous thanks to the MCU and all the comic book movies. But that specific kind of very nerdy, deep rabbit hole genre storytelling blew my mind. I'd never seen anything like it. And I wanted more. And he was like, no problem. My dad goes to America like once a month. He'll pick up some more comic books. But now you got to pay. So, and this was his plan from the beginning.
He roped you in.
First one's always free. Yeah.
Free. And then I was like, all right, well, there's a cover price. He's like, yeah, 10 times that.
Whoa.
10 times the cover price per comic book. Didn't work. No one did it. We eventually did find a comic book shop in Hong Kong because it was the 90s boom and there was comic shops everywhere. But that was my entry into comics.
And what were the besides the Superman 497, what else as a kid were you into?
I was reading, I remember buying Venom Lethal Protector 1 off the stands. I remember, it was a big gimmick era. So all the gimmicky stuff, trading cards, Wizard magazine was probably the most influential because we didn't get a lot of comics in Hong Kong. You could get new comic books, and they were also about 3 or 4 times cover price because of shipping. Not the 10 times my friend was trying to charge me, but any back issues were just not available. So I remember reading in Wizard about Valiant comics and reading about Magnus and Exo Manowar and thinking these look amazing, they look awesome, but never having a chance to read them until like 10 years later when I came here for film school at USC. And then I was like, look, eBay, I can get shit sent to me from eBay. You can't get stuff sent to Hong Kong. Most sellers don't want to send stuff to Hong Kong, at least back then.
Yeah.
Finally, stuff.
As I say, it's kind of a shame JP, the other host, isn't here today because he always talks about like the MCU made Iron Man popular. He grew up, he loved Exo Manowar, and he loved it much better than Iron Man. Yeah.
Exo's
but yeah, you talked about the cards. Mike and I both share the same thing. Like those Marvel cards from the early 90s, like that was our intro into Marvel, more so than even comics.
Yeah, they were great. They told you the little synopsis of every character, some of the major battles, the power rankings. Which series were you guys? What was your series?
So for me personally, my first big one was Series 2, even though I collected Series 1, Series 2, and Series 3 of the Marvel Universe. And so my favorite character is Silver Surfer, and I will never forget, I got handed the Series 2 Silver Surfer card in 4th grade at the bus stop, and I flipped it over, and I saw those power ratings, and I was forever blown away.
Yeah.
What about you, Mike?
I was the same. It was 2, and I think I've told the story before, with Rohan. But I met this random kid. I used to live next to a playground, and I didn't even know who he was. But he's he just kind of latched onto me. He was moving, and he's my best friend all of a sudden. And we went to the card store. I was into sports cards. I had comic books, but mostly DC. And he bought a pack of Series 2. He just wanted a hologram. He opened the pack, no hologram. Here you go, kid, and gave it to me. Same thing. I flipped him over. My mind was blown. I'm like, I don't know who these guys are, but they have stats. Like every kid just wants to see, like, you have those hypotheticals in your brain, who would beat who, and you're like, I have stats now. Down the rabbit hole I went. So I started off with 2, and then I went back and got 1, and the Marvel Masterpieces came out, and I met another friend who was into them, and forget it. Once you can trade with someone, it was over.
I would say the 4 big ones for me were the Series 1, 2, and 3, and then the Jim Lee X-Men Series 1.
Those are great.
Yeah, and so my question for both of you actually would be, so Series 2, Series 3, and Jim Lee X-Men, they had power ratings in the back. Series 2 had a bar chart. Series 3 had kind of like those laser lines.
Yeah.
And then X-Men Series 1 had that line graph. Did you guys have a preference on which one you thought was better?
What do you think, Mike?
I definitely do. I mean, so I think the laser looked better, but the second series, and I've talked about this in the past, my favorite ability is agility. My favorite character is a Nightcrawler, Spider-Man, Daredevil, these fast characters. I was a tiny kid, but I was quick. I love that. So I love the agility, but they got rid of it and they replaced it with fighting style, which made sense for like Wolverine or Sabretooth. But I was so mad. I was like, I want the agility stat. So I would have to go with 2 just for that.
Stat away. That's messed up.
Yeah, right.
You remember, Mike, we talked about it on our first episode with you. Agility was the only metric no one in the entire Marvel universe had a 7.
Nope. Spider-Man and Nightcrawler, I think Puma were 6s, and no one's 6. Faster. Yeah,
was it out of 7 on Series 2?
Out of 7, yeah.
There was no Series 1 or Series 2 in Hong Kong. No Jim Lee X-Men cards. I got Series 3, and then the Marvel Masterpieces came out, but they disappeared very quickly. Yeah. So for me, it's all that laser-looking thing. I love that. I do think the bar chart's better, though, looking back.
Oh, yeah. I think it's the best representation of showing it all. Yeah, it's awesome.
It's a very retro comic book style, too. You know, the other one's very 90s, the lasers.
Yeah. It didn't go to 10, though? Why wouldn't it go to 10?
I have no idea, but what was really cool also with Series 2 is at the end of the set, they had double face cards that gave you the breakdown. So I always remember like strength 7 was you could lift 100 tons or more, and like level 6 was to 100 tons. Yeah, Mike, you got them right there available.
Right, I was behind me. I still look at these like all the time. There's nothing that brings me back, man, to my youth. Not a single thing that I own that brings me back more than these cards do.
Yeah, and then like speed 7, full speed is light speed or faster. I remember, and I love those. Are you pulling those out right now, Mike?
Yeah, I got a couple here. So
who had a 6 on agility?
It was Nightcrawler right there, 6, and I think did Spider-Man have 6 as well?
Yeah, on the card. Yeah, he's not on this though. And I always made me laugh that below normal number 1, Aunt May.
Aunt May, yeah, least agile person in the Marvel universe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, you don't know.
What's that?
In her day, have they ever done a period Aunt May story?
I mean, nowadays though, like Aunt May is of all ages. I mean, even in the current movies, she's like a younger gal, and then I think even in some of the newer comics, she's a younger. But I haven't seen like a stat.
She's dead in the movies, man.
Oh, well, she just recently died. Yes,
but Marissa Tomei, she was like a 2, but if she was a 3, she might have dodged the glider.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
the proof is in her death. She was
exactly not that.
Yeah, justified her rating right there.
Yeah, right.
So Dinesh, then take us on further down the line. Was there a break? So like me, for example, I collected till I was about 8 or 9, and then I picked it up last year, 30 years later.
Really?
Yeah. And so I've just gotten back in, and obviously I've jumped way in if I've got a podcast now. Mike, you're kind of similar too, right?
I've never stopped collecting. I never had like big books until like my channel started. My channel took off. I don't know, Dinesh, you probably have no idea. My channel like just took off really fast. I did it as like a gaff, like with my kid, just for fun, and I didn't think anyone would watch. And then, so all of a sudden, I started going to more shows, and I felt better about spending $100 on a comic book. And then, before you know it, it's not just the cheap comic books I like to read as a kid. You start getting bigger stuff. It's a weird experience, you know. It's
fun though.
There's different levels. Maybe we could talk about this. There's different levels of collecting. I'm sure you know with the books you have. There's the books that you love to read that remind you of your youth, the art, the stories, and then there's the collecting aspect of it. Having something really nice, you know, and the value of it. There's sort of two sides of it. And it's kind of fun to straddle the line into both. That's what comics can do, you know. It's a cool part of the hobby.
Yeah, and it's difficult also because I find that so many people that tell you, oh, that's not something that you should be collecting, and that's not good art or good story. And it's like, who cares? I grew up with this. It's important to me. I just bought a Ravage 2099 #1. I love that thing so much. It's not a good book, but I love it so much. And people were like, what are you doing buying this thing? Why? Why not?
Yeah. You know, kind of on that sentiment, I heard someone say the other day, it's like, you know, when you talk about where you could spend money, it's like, you know, you could spend $1,000 on Bitcoin, let's just say. Yeah. You could lose it. Bitcoin could completely crash, and you have nothing to show for it. We can spend $1,000 on comics. It could crash, but I still have the joy of having the comics that I bought with it, and I have something tangible with it. So.
Right. Yep. Collect what you love, and you'll never be poor, right?
Yeah. That certainly was my thinking pre-pandemic. The prices were different, obviously, and and I was thinking about where to put money, and I don't really trust the stock market. And real estate is insane, right? It's not really an affordable entry point for most people. And here are comics; they're stable. They do appreciate over time. There's an entry point for everybody. You know, you can pick your book to get into and pick the grade as well. And if it goes wrong, I still love the book. So I was picking stuff up that I felt like if this is worth it, it's still worth something to me. First time I had a giant size X-Men or something like that was a big deal. But I agree with you. I mean, I think a lot of people share that sentiment. At least a lot of friends of mine that are collectors share that sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, I think Mike and I, we've talked about when we've been on episodes together. It's not like we're sitting here going, giant size X-Men 1, mortgage payment. Like we pay, you know what I mean? So it's like,
right.
Yeah.
Especially with prices today.
Yeah. So then you were saying you went to film school at USC. Is that kind of what kind of springboarded the kind of everything else on the line?
I was not a cool 9-year-old like you. I didn't leave comics. I didn't even enter comics then. I was only into comics from about 11 to 13, 14. And it was Death of Superman and all the 29.9 books and that like big boom. And everyone I knew in high school was reading comic books. And then everyone just like one summer decided to start reading comic books. Mm-hmm. I was maybe 3 or 4 months later. I still love them, but then I was like, oh, I gotta get rid of them. Plus you find other things as you grow up. And it wasn't until I didn't really touch comics. I did buy Wizard magazine every now and then. And I would go to the comic store maybe once every 3 or 4 years just to look around. But I didn't get back into it until I got to America. And on eBay, I bought all the Valiant books that I never got a chance to read. And I thought, oh, this will be nostalgia. And I remember I never had these books. They were worth like $50, $100 in Wizard magazine. That was too much money for me. And I couldn't get them anyway, even if I had the money. Now I can get them. They're dollars, cents on the dollar. And I started reading them. And I was like, these are really, really, really good. And I just deep dived into Valiant. And then that led to looking up stuff online and then deep diving into other independent books. I didn't really start reading a lot of Marvel and DC for a few years after that. I got really into Valiant. And then I was lucky enough, I started to be involved with the company. And so I got hyper-focused on that. And there's no time when you're publishing.
As a quick aside, I just want to mention, you mentioned Wizard, and we were just talking about power ratings. So do you guys remember there was an issue of Wizard? So like I said, my favorite character was Silver Surfer. My brother, his favorite character was Superman. Wizard won. I cannot remember the issue number, but they did a top 10 most powerful characters of Marvel, DC. Not exclude. They only didn't include cosmic character or like the god level type characters.
Yeah.
And I always remember it was such a victorious moment because they put Silver Surfer as number 1 and Superman as number 2, and that was just such a.
It's true. It makes sense. It makes total sense.
Definitely.
Yeah. Both technically cosmic characters. I mean,
I know. I was going to say the same thing. Silver Surfer is really on the fence.
yeah, exactly. So, but that I
think they were looking at like Galactus, Beyonder, In Betweener. Those the
and then like Eternity and the those Living Tribunal, those kind of
Ego.
Okay, so take us from film school, and then so Mike and I were actually discussing this before you jumped on, before we went live. So we know Valiant started. Well before, when we were all kids.
Yeah.
And then obviously, I'm assuming it went down, or I don't know. We all know that you took over Valiant at some point in the resurgence. Kind of take us through this.
Valiant started in the late 80s. They were very popular in the early 90s, became this massive library of characters. I think at one point, even the third in terms of market share was Marvel, DC, and then Valiant. And there's a big gap, and then Image for a little while. There were periods where Image was number 3, periods of Valiant number 3. It was really in contention. And then they got bought by a video game company named Acclaim. Acclaim is the company that
made like the Mario comic came out and everything. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So Acclaim put out Acclaim rebuilt the entire universe. They rebooted it and they focused on making the comics adaptable to video games. And they had success. They had Shadow Man series of games. Turok was huge games. Iron Man, Extra Manowar game, Armorines game, a bunch of games. But the comic book suffered, plus it was a very dark period in comics. It was not a period in which a lot of people were reading comic books. And they struggled, and then they shut the publishing division down. And then shortly afterwards, Acclaim filed for bankruptcy as a whole, the entire company. They had been financial improprieties, and they had mismanaged the company, and this storied video game company was going into bankruptcy. And I was working in Hollywood in a film and TV production company that was were struggling. They were doing mostly commercials at that point, music videos and commercials. And so I spent a lot of my time on the Valiant fans message board during work, reading about Valiant Comics. And I read a rumor that Valiant had been sold to a company named Film Roman for $50,000. $50,000 is a lot of money, but it's nothing compared to what a library like Valiant is worth, even back then. And I thought, this is fucked up. I should have done something about it. I should have. Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do, but something, right?
What were you doing job wise at this point?
I was still in film school. So I was in film school, and I had been lying to the people that I've been working for and said I graduated so that I could work for them 2 days a week. But then I'd be like sick or I had a car accident or whatever, and I'd go to school 2 days a week. And most kids in film school do this. You use the time and the name of the school to try and get internships or jobs or whatever. So I was working on the Universal Studios a lot for a filmmaker named Neil LaBute and a producer named Gail Mutrux and Valerie Dean, and they were doing movies like the Wicker Man remake is what we were working on. There was a Christopher Nolan script they were trying to get off the ground, a bunch of stuff, and it was a real eye-opening thing. But for me, I found, even though I hadn't graduated, I was climbing the ladder pretty quickly. I was involved in a lot of projects. I was leading some. I was in meetings, and I hit a glass ceiling before I even graduated on the development side. And I had a direct superior who'd been there 10 years, and he had never been given the shot to produce something or take the next step. And I looked at him and saw my future and realized I have to do something different, or I'm going to end up like him. By the way, he's still there in that same job. He never got his shot. So I started thinking, well, what can I do? Read this rumor about Valiant and thought, I remember this. I remember Spider-Man came out, and I came to work on the lot, and nobody understood why it had made 114 million, biggest opening of all time. All of us know it's the toys, the cartoons, and the video games, and the comic books, and all this stuff, right? There's legions of fans, multiple generations. Hollywood still to this day doesn't really understand, most people, why comic books work, and because they're not real fans. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm ahead of the curve a little bit. And what happened to my favorite company, Valiant? I look it up, bankruptcy auction. No, sorry, rumor that they'd been sold to Film Roman. Then the rumor proved false, and there was going to be a bankruptcy auction. So I made a list of people that I went to school with in Hong Kong, because I had friends whose parents were wealthy. My parents are not, but I had friends that were wealthy, and I said, I'll make a list of people. And my Venn diagram was who would have wealthy parents who would just be happy their kid is doing something and therefore would fund it, and whose friend of mine, knew and remembered how big Valiant was, so they understood the opportunity. And actually, I didn't mean for this. It was the guy that gave me that free comic book and then tried to charge me 10 times.
I was gonna say, did you give a 10x markup there?
Yeah, it was him so I called him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, Valiant's amazing. Let's do it. My daddy will fund it." And we went to the bankruptcy auction, and we did our due diligence. And finally, the day of the auction happens, and we get outbid. We can't. There's only 86 parties went to do due diligence, which is read all the documentation, figure out what's there. And they had to put a $25,000 refundable deposit down to do that. We were one of those 86 parties. And it was like, we had a list. It was Sony, Paramount, Google, all these major companies. And only 3 parties went to the auction. And it was myself, the former CEO of Acclaim, and this marketing manager from Marvel that had left, and he had money through however means. And he had tried to buy CrossGen, got outbid, and was now trying to buy Valiant. And the reason everyone else didn't turn up is because the legal documents proving chain of title, proving what you were buying, kept getting lost from the LA law firm. I had, through due diligence, gotten a copy of the employee list from Acclaim Comics. And most of them lived in New York because that's what publishing was. I was in New York a lot at that point doing due diligence. And I just took them all out to dinners and drinks, and I didn't have a lot of money, so whatever I could. And they would take pity on a little kid trying to do this, and they would give me the documents, and I got a sense of what was there. And I found that actually they'd mismanaged the company to such an extent they had not encumbered the licenses. The copyrights were still, the chain title was clear. And so I was able to go in with an idea of what we were buying, still got outbid. It was the marketing manager. So the reason that the documents didn't show up is because the brother of the guy that ran the law firm was the CEO of Acclaim, and he was trying to buy the assets. So he didn't want anyone else to compete with. He came third, we came second. This guy wins it, the marketing manager. Immediately online, there are articles saying there's a 4th party who did not bid. They've got intent to use trademark applications. They're going to blackmail the winning bidder, and it's going to be this 2-year, 7-figure legal fight. The lead bidder pulls out. The trustees call me, and I say, what about the acclaimed CEO? And they stupidly said, well, he already put his money elsewhere. I said, good, so you're out of options. So I'll come in at a massive reduction in price. And they had, because I've got to pay for this legal fight. And they said, okay, they had no choice. So I got this very discounted price and got into a 2-year legal battle for trademarks. That was my first 2 years of Valiant. And then spent another 5 years trying to figure out how the business works. I didn't know anything. I didn't know how comics are made, how they're sold, how they're marketed, how to get financing, none of that stuff, no connections. Spent 7 years total doing that. Best thing that happened to me was Marvel was sold to Disney. What I did get a hold of is the Harvard Business School case study called Peter Cuneo and the Marvel. Peter Cuneo and Marvel. And Peter Cuneo was the CEO of Marvel from its bankruptcy through to its sale to Disney. Right about the time it sold to Disney, he became vice chairman actually for a little while. And he walked through their entire strategy of licensing, of keeping rights, of slowly building publishing. And I mimicked that. And then they sold to Marvel, and I was able to convince him to become my first major investor. I'd built the team, I'd built the plan. And so he came in, gave us some funding, legitimized us. And with that, we were able to launch that was end of 2010. We launched in 2012. I convinced him to let me take an extra year to build the books.
So that was post the legal fight then, the 2-year legal fight?
Yeah.
So did your friend's dad help cover the cost of that legal fight then?
Yes and no. It's a poison chalice because yes, but then he spent the 7 years that we were working together trying to get the company off the ground. He spent most of it trying to cheat me out of my end of the company. So it was a very difficult time. You learn a lot of very harsh lessons. I feel like I'm just full of scars from business underneath. And so I constantly get into business situations where I'm like, okay, I know what to do here because I got screwed once before. And that memory now makes sure I don't get it wrong. And I think that's a lot of businesses. They say fail fast and fail often, and then you get it right. And I think Valiant, my experience of Valiant was that when we launched Valiant, I remember articles coming out being like, these guys can't do anything wrong. It's the blueprint for how to launch a company. Every decision's the right decision. And doing interviews, people say, how do you know the right thing to do? Well, I did all the wrong things for the last 7 years. There's nothing else left to do. I guess these are the right choices. It really feels like that.
Wow. Okay. So he comes on, he legitimizes you.
Yeah.
Kind of what happens from there then?
So we launched in 2012. We were the largest new publisher launch in 17 years, largest since the original Valiant, actually, which was great. And people accused us of buying our own books. The launch was so large. Rob Liefeld came out very much against us, saying this is not possible. And then we kept selling that well, issues 2s, 3, 4s, more launches. People started to think, wow, there's something happening here.
Was it just relaunching the titles from before, or were the new titles?
Yeah, the conventional wisdom was you launch with a bunch of titles the first month, like 5 to 10 titles, see which one sticks, make them all $1. Don't say shared universe. Don't be too loud and offensive in your marketing. And it didn't make sense to us. So what we did is we launched with 1 title the first month, 4 titles in 4 months, 1 per month, $3.99 regular priced, put everything into those titles, really loud marketing, shared universe. And the first book was X-O Manowar. It had an Asad Ribic cover, which we were very lucky to get. The minute we announced that cover, Marvel called him and said, no more for Valiant. So that was, we did 3 with him before Marvel pulled the plug. Robert Venditti launched the book. He had never written an ongoing book before. He'd written Surrogates as a miniseries, which became a movie for Top Shelf, but never anything big two, never superheroes, never an ongoing. He launched our entire company, and Carrie Nord was the artist. And Carrie's an amazing artist. He'd done Conan, but he'd fallen by the wayside. He has trouble sometimes at deadlines, and he was in a period where people weren't ready to put him on a big book. And so we took this kind of Moneyball approach. Here's an artist no one will trust. Here's a writer no one has ever given the shot to. And here's an approach that's very different than any approach anyone that knows what they're doing says we should do. And we thought it was the right thing to do because we looked at all the conventional launches and none of them worked. And it seemed to us they didn't work for the reasons they were saying they would work. So we tried this different approach.
Real quick, you mentioned Asad Ribic. I obviously know him as a current artist. Were you guys able to get him because of the guy that was a former Marvel CEO, or how did in your position, how did you score him?
That's a great question. We brought in, so I didn't know what I was doing. I was still making up as I went along, and my goal was to pretend like I knew. right? And so I surrounded myself with people that were older, gray-haired comic executives. So we had Fred Pierce, who was at Valiant originally, and then ran Wizard magazine for years. He was the head of Wizard. We had Peter Cuneo, who was CEO of Marvel. Russ Brown, head of licensing at Marvel. We had Walter Black, who ran his own publishing company in the book world, and then ran Acclaim Publishing for a long time. And we had a guy named Warren Simons. Warren was an editor at Marvel. He oversaw the Joe Straczynski Thor, Brubaker Fraction Iron Fist, a bunch of books like that. And he had, when you have Iron Man and Daredevil and Thor as books at Marvel that you're editing, you make a lot of relationships. And he had some relationships, and he pulled whatever he could in, and he was able to get Assad in for a couple covers, 3 covers. Yeah. Awesome. And it was the whole time it was that way. We became a feeder system. Robert Venditti, who launched X-Men Manowar, went and wrote Green Lantern and Hawkman, and is writing Superman now for DC. DC would look at everything we put out, and anyone new, they would immediately offer jobs to. But the guys were Rob stayed with us the entire time. He did over 50 issues of X-Men Manowar, then wrote another book for us. He still works for us, A Bad Idea now. He stayed very loyal to us, he's a great guy and a great writer.
Awesome. I mean, that's amazing. And so you guys have taken off. You've since, obviously you're with Bad Idea now. So kind of what's the path from Valiant to Bad Idea?
So I ran Bad Idea. It was a total of 15 years. Once we started publishing, 8 years after that, and it was constantly trying to break bigger and bigger and bigger. And we were slowly growing the company. And the way publishing works is, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I don't know if fans know this, probably not. Every publisher loses money. Every single publisher, Marvel, DC, not Image, because they're not a publisher. They're more like a facilitator. The creators take the financial burden on at Image, but IDW, Dark Horse, Boom, everyone, Valiant, Bad Idea, all of us, we all burn money as a publishing enterprise, because the comic book business is not a great business. You can do a little better with film and TV. That's very hard. It takes a long time. And licensing and merchandising is really where money comes in. But you have to get to Marvel, DC levels. And usually those P&Ls, they don't count merchandising against comic books. The alternate way to go is you build a library that's valuable enough that someone comes in and wants to take it away from you. And I knew that if I was successful at Valiant, I would get fired. I would get pushed out. That happens to these kind of small entrepreneurial companies. And so I was running the company, and we were bringing in more investors because we needed to constantly renew the financing. And we brought this Chinese company in. And after about 2 or 3 years, the Chinese company, very much like what we were doing, we had a lot of success on the film and TV side. We had Bloodshot at Sony, which eventually became a movie. We had Harbinger at Sony, 5-picture deal. We had the Russo brothers writing X-Men Manowar. They were going to direct right after Avengers 4. We had a huge Quantum and Woody TV show with a bunch of stars. We had, I'm trying to remember, Ruben Fleischer was doing Archer Armstrong. Reggie Hudlin was doing Shadow Man. Joe Straczynski was writing a movie. A bunch of people, all these big names, a lot of stuff happening, a lot of TV shows about to go. And this Chinese company said, well, we want all that. And they went around to all the other investors. They bought them up, and they got enough control to be able to force myself and Peter Cuneo, the last 2 shareholders that didn't want to sell, out. And in forcing us out, we had to get paid somewhat market, a little under market, which was still a lot of money. And that was the end of my Valiant journey. But they didn't do a good job of it. They fired us. They forced to resign is what they say. They forced us to resign all on the same day. They put a press release out that said CEO, Chief Creative Officer, CFO, COO, and Chairman all leave in one day. This is a ridiculously stupid thing to do. So everyone panicked. My deal with the company when they pushed me out was just get out as quickly as possible. You don't have any non-compete. You don't have nothing. I didn't have to wait. I wasn't a consultant for 3 years. I didn't have to wait for my money. So literally day one, I started hashing out what Bad Idea was going to be. And that was kind of part of my coping mechanism for, here's this baby that I love, that I birthed, that's being taken away from me now and is going to go in a different direction, and subsequently hasn't gone in a good direction. And I have to watch this happen. So I'm going to have, another one. I'm going to have another baby.
What year are we talking about here?
This is the end. This is the beginning of 2018.
Okay.
January 2018.
Got it. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's very interesting. So you were you went from that right into Bad Idea then?
Yeah, I started thinking, well, my epiphany very quickly was, I said, okay, what would I do? And I realized at Valiant, I had a house that someone else built, and I had to make that house as nice as it could be and as successful as it could be. But now I'm building my own house, and I don't have to own the Valiant tone or the Valiant personality. What is my tone? And also, what do I think is the best way to publish? And I started to have these wacky ideas of, well, let's not distribute through Diamond, and let's not do variants, and we can take that time and money. Variants, it's so much time and money. Let's put that into the books. And what if we do larger books? What if we don't worry about page counts? What if we do extra stories? What if I build short stories? All these crazy things that became Bad Idea. And then while I was doing all that, one by one, the crew that I loved at Valiant that were amazing, Adam Freeman, Josh Johns, all these people started to leave Valiant. They couldn't deal with those Chinese guys. It was not a good workplace. And they would call me and say, well, what are you doing? I know you're doing something. You've got something up your sleeve. And I said, well, I'm working on a publishing company. They'd say, can I come? Yeah, sure. I could use a head of sales. I could use a head of marketing. I could use it, whatever. And so the team started to coalesce, and then creators started to leave, and all those film and TV projects fell apart. And I almost said something I wasn't meant to. I caught myself though. I almost said something I would have gotten a lot of trouble with. Someone in the film and TV world came in to Bad Idea. We haven't talked about it ever, and became kind of the impetus for why we've been able to go as long as we have without really having to compromise. They essentially said to us, we want to give you this long runway, and don't worry about us. Do your own thing. We want to see what happens here, which is wonderful.
Got it. So as I mentioned, like, I just got back in a year ago. My main area of knowledge is Marvel and just a little bit of DC. So I know you guys have a new book coming out called Monolith. Are there other titles? Megalith. Yeah. Sorry, Megalith. Are there other titles with Bad Idea though? Before we start talking about that.
Yeah, and it's the same model at Valiant. So the idea at Valiant was this: if we make the best books in the business, we attempt to, right? I mean, that's a subjective idea, but we try to make the best books in the business, and we mark towards that. Can we break through that way? And so at Valiant, we were the best read publisher in the business every year that I was there. In these 8 years that I ran the thing as a publishing entity, we were nominated for over 1,000 awards. One year we were at the Harvey had 50 nominations one year. At Bad Idea, we've tried to up that. So what we do at Bad Idea is we don't publish a lot. We're seasonal publisher, which means we have 5-6 months at a time where we're publishing, and there's a couple of books coming out a month. And then there's 5-6 months where we're not, like we are right now. We're very much internal. We're building books, and we want to make the best books we can with the best people we can. And we don't do variants. We don't do digital. We don't do collections. It's comic stores. It's comics in comic stores. There's about 200 Bad Idea destination stores. And it's just trying to be really high quality. So we launched with a book called ENIAC. Louis LaRosa did the cover. Matt Kint wrote it. Doug Braithwaite drew it. Phenomenal book. Really lucky. People loved it. Sold really, really, really well. Kind of proved the model for us. Because we went from being in 4,000 stores around the world to 200 stores that are destination stores. And the idea was, Jerry Maguire, can we say to ourselves, with 200 stores, we can give them the right, if we can pick the right stores and give them the right love, can we increase our sales? And we found that we're able to sell better in those 200 stores than we're able to sell in 4,000 stores at Valiant. And that came from a statistic: 154 stores at Valiant were selling 80% of our sales.
And then is the model of publishing 6 months, not publishing 6 months, is that because in the 6 months you're not publishing, you're kind of brainstorming like what to put out in those next coming 6 months?
It's somewhat that. It's a couple of things. It's one, we don't want to kill ourselves. Publishing is a very difficult job, and there's not a lot of us. There's only 5 people at Bad Idea, and there's only 5 because we're an experimental publisher, and the more people you bring in, the more you have to shave around the edges. So we want to be, kind of incendiary in a good way. Try to push the envelope, and you can only do that if you have a small group of like-minded people. So there's not a lot of bandwidth in terms of work. And the other thing is, the most important thing you can give, we believe, to any creative endeavor to make it better is time. Mm-hmm. We want to take time. We don't want to rush scripts. We want to do all the art patches that we feel will help the book. We want to recolor a book if we have to. We've got a book right now, we're recoloring it from scratch because we had a point of view that changed, and this is a better point of view. And the creators love this kind of, they get paid again, obviously, but they love making stuff better. We want to take our time lettering. We want to take our time to production. We want to take our time printing. We want to make sure everything is not bespoke, but tailored. A little level above that, so that it doesn't feel like there's anything else on the marketplace like it. When you buy a Bad Idea book, we do charge more. You feel like you're getting a luxury product that no one else in the marketplace can compete with, because they're not taking 6 months off to just adore and slather love onto this one issue. That's what we tried.
But I'll be honest, like, because that is one thing I always think about is that how you can keep continuously on a cycle of, like, you know, one book a month or whatever it is, and keep it fresh, keep it, you know, and so, like, I can understand how that kind of works well for you guys.
Yeah, you've got to fill the reservoir creatively as well. So
yeah,
the breaks is, I tell the whole team, when we start the break, the first week is everyone is not allowed to read anything that's happening in the company, no scripts, nothing. But you all are going to take that time and go watch movies, go watch Broadway, go read books, cartoons, video games, just rebuild your creative reservoir. So for the next 6 months when we're building, you can say, hey, you know, for that week I was playing this game and they did this cool thing. And maybe if we twist it and it'll become different, but it's fueling, it's inspiring you. So we try and do that.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, and Dinesh, I don't know if we're going to get on the topic here. I know what you mentioned, Rohan, you know, Megalith, and obviously you guys had a very successful Kickstarter campaign. One of the things that really kind of blows my mind since because of like COVID and post-COVID and then like the sort of recession is it forced a lot of companies to do business differently, right? Ideas that people always had about cutting down on overhead, we were sort of forced to do it. But even after the pandemic, you had a lot of companies saying, we don't need a building anymore. We don't need as many floors. People don't need to commute. We don't need to spend more on gas. And, you know, you had things like Kickstarter was around obviously before all this happened. You know, it seems like a lot of the ideas you had, the seeds were already planted before the pandemic. But when you have a successful campaign like that, and Kickstarter largely is that self-published people where they are pet projects. They pour their heart and soul into it, and that's the appeal. You may be spending more money, but you know you're getting something that's from the heart. Do you think, with seeing the success of what you guys are doing and the model that you guys have, are you going to see a lot more of these in the future, especially maybe as a pushback for the Marvels and the DCs, these large publishing companies, you know, distribution companies? Are you going to see more stuff like this from a smaller, you know, capacity? Do you think the larger published companies are going to follow that model? I'm kind of leading the question. I think I know what your answer is going to be here, but I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, I know we are. Every single person I know in publishing is right now working on a Kickstarter. And I think there's two reasons. One is Kickstarter is doing very well. We've been part of that group of people that have shown that you can do very well. And I think Boom has done much better than anybody. They've really been the big superstars in that world. But also the direct market comic book stores for new comics have really struggled this year. There was an incredible boom during the pandemic. The pandemic was very annoying for Bad Idea and very helpful. Bad Idea was annoying because all the things that were competitive advantages, suddenly everyone was forced to adopt, and they saw the wisdom in it. So remote working and self-distribution, and we've seen distribution splinter into 4 different distributors now. That was all, we were a little prescient, but the pandemic, I think, pushed everyone faster to get there. On the other hand, it did certainly help because a lot of people were focused on comics. You just came back, Rohan. A lot of people either came back or doubled down on comics during the pandemic. And there was a new publisher in town that was putting out stuff that looked cool, hopefully it looks cool, and people jumped on that. So we built a huge fan base much quicker than we thought we would be, which was great. The Kickstarter route for us was we were doing a new slate of books and we were looking for ways to promote it. And we like to latch on to something that is in the kind of mental real estate of the comic community. And we knew Kickstarter was. So we built this Kickstarter, the first one called Stop Bad Idea. And it was an excuse to promote the books. We had all the art from the upcoming books in the Kickstarter. We talked about it constantly. We didn't talk about the Kickstarter. And we had this goal of, if we raise $2.6 million, we'll go away forever. Haters can put their money where their mouth is. And the thing made $150,000, and we thought it would make like $2,000.
Huh.
So we were like, okay, I don't know if it's promoted the books, but this is a whole new revenue stream and another vertical for us to take a look at. And we thought, okay, well, how do we test if this was a one-off or not? We had this book, Megalith, that Lewis Lewis has been slaving over 5 years. It's incredible. And we were struggling with what to do with it because we had not yet grown up into a publisher that could put a book like that out to its full capacity, get it wide enough. We were a niche publisher. We're still young. And we thought, well, Kickstarter is a very wide berth. So let's try it there. And it became this $500,000 success. We've got a new one that's launching soon where we thought to ourselves, okay, well, now we're getting a little cocky. What can we do? How can we turn this into something used for good? We've always struggled with digital. Digital comics are there's a lot of misconceptions about it. They've mismanaged it, in our opinion, across the board in comics. Really, Amazon, through Comixology, has mismanaged it. At one point, digital comics were selling 25% of total sales. That was in addition to publishing. They weren't pulling much from publishing. Now that's down to like 4%. It's not like video games or movies where you have like Netflix or streaming, or music where you have Spotify. That's a huge avenue for the industry that can bring new fans in and have casual people continue to consume that content. Digital doesn't do that. Right? My wife should be reading digital comics. She doesn't. And I think part of it is we've been given the lowest end version of that product. The experience is not as good as reading physically. If you get to a double page spread in a comic book and you get to it digitally, it's not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, there's all these things that digital can do natively. I don't know if you guys know this, but when comics are built, the artist will draw at least an inch around the comic for the trim lines, so that the printer, either it gets folded into the gutter of the comic book, right? So if you've got a book opening up, part of that gets stuck in here where the staple is and you can't see it. Well, part of it needs to get trimmed and they can't exactly tell where the paper's going to cut, so they make you draw that much extra. People like David Lapham, they'll draw like 3 times the art. So we'll get panels that are this big and we're cropping. We have to pick where to crop in. It's nerve-wracking. You guys never see that art. Digital can show that art. Print can't. Digital can. There's 16,000 colors that we can use in print. And we're constantly running up this problem where colors will color something, it'll look beautiful, and the printer will say, that's an illegal, they call it an illegal color, we can't use that, you've got to change it, and we lessen the book. Or occasionally, we'll be able to spend a ton of money, spend a ton of time, do a 5th ink metallic or non-gamut process that makes it look like a black light or something like that. There's 16,000 colors in publishing, 16.2 million you can use digitally. Huh. So you can do all sorts of things. And this is just some of that. Plus pencils, layouts, trivia, editorial notes, scripts. I mean, why don't we get all this stuff just given to us when we buy a digital comic book? We should be able to. Additional scenes, alternate endings, alternate lettering, alternate coloring. I mean, stuff all exists. We build it all when we make the comic book. What we realize is that what we see as professionals, when we approve because we approve digitally, our digital files are nothing like what you guys see. And it exists. You just port it over. So we have this campaign, which is called Only You Can Save Digital Comics from Amazon. And we're taking this book, The End, which we put out last year, and got this incredible response that David Lapham wrote and drew it. And people absolutely went gaga for it. And we went to Dave and we said, let's kind of do Evil Dead 2 here. Let's remake the book. Let's keep everything we have. Let's build it out bigger. Let's make it better. Let's double down the character. Let's double down the visuals. Let's show all the stuff that we had to cut. Let's show all that art. Let's color it. It was black and white. And let's make a kind of, for one time, bad idea with digital, and let's make a showcase piece that hopefully people look at and say, I want this every time. And then they can go call Amazon and say, don't tell me you can't give it to me. These guys are proving that you can. That's our next, at least that's what we're working on now.
I will say I'm a sucker for like behind the scenes extras, you know, whenever you have like Netflix, wherever it may be. I like the extra things. And I like trade paperbacks. I'm a comic book guy because a lot of times trade paperbacks have an appendice. They have those, you know, designer notes by the writer and the artists and the producers, all those guys, the editors. I love that stuff, and it makes me seek out a lot of these bigger anthologies and trade paperbacks. I would kill to have something like that. It reminds me. I don't know if you guys remember this. The original Dark Phoenix saga. They had a book that came out later, the truth behind it, because the whole thing, Chris Claremont was made to change the ending of that story by Jim Shooter, ironically, right? Yeah. So they published one later, and the whole back half of that book is the behind the scenes. And I was like, why don't we always have this? It's my favorite part. And that's really cool that you guys have that idea. I mean, I'd kill to have a digital copy. Just publish it that way. I would love it.
All this stuff exists. I've seen so much Dark Phoenix art, designs that aren't even in that. I've seen, I love Marvels, and I've got the big Marvels deluxe edition, and it's got its designs in the back. And I became friends with the guy that runs Xbox's company. I was telling him about it, and he sent me an email, and he was like, oh, here's 500 more. They can't print them all because they're limited by pages. They have to pick their favorite 5, 10, 20, 25. He did 500 designs for that book. You could do a book just of those designs, but on digitally, you can do it all. You can do a 500-page PDF, super high resolution. That's printable if you want. Right. So yeah, we're going to try and at least hopefully educate some people in at least the things that they're missing out on, so they don't feel like this is the best version. Even if they were here not getting it, they should know.
Well, they feel like they're getting more too, and that's a big thing as well. A lot of times, stories, even if when you love it, you feel like you're done. But when you have that insight into what's going on in the company, you appreciate a lot more. You also appreciate the company that's doing it, and I think that really helps you guys as well.
I hope so. And we're going to try. What we've been talking about is in the tiers, we'll just give you a hardcover to you. So if you buy the digital book, we'll just give you the hardcover for free. That way, when you get it, you get the digital and you get the hardcover, and then you get to see the colors don't print the same. The art is cropped. You can't see all the detail. The printing doesn't have the resolution the digital has. And we had to make choices about what back matter. We could only give you this much back matter in the hardcover, not, this much in the digital file.
That's awesome.
But to answer your question, every publisher I know, every independent creator I know is right now mounting a Kickstarter.
Yep.
I think it'll be a small boom. I think we'll have a lot of them. I don't think they'll all succeed. I think there are specific reasons certain ones succeed. I think it's about how you're able to marshal your audience, and you have to provide something that is unique and interesting. And then I think fulfillment's going to kill a lot of it, because Carrie Nord, for instance, just did a Kickstarter, and I saw him at Heroes Con, and he was like, "Oh my God, I didn't know how much work fulfilling all this stuff is. I had thousands of backers, and now I got to sit at home and I'm taping up thousands of boxes. It's a lot." He's like, "I should be drawing, but instead I'm like a mailman."
Yeah. I mean, Swaggle Haas has had some videos come out about him just mailing out his comic book for his. So yeah, I you can see a little bit behind the scenes. Do you want to talk a little bit at all about Megalith coming out?
Sure. Yeah, Megalith is a book. Matt Kint wrote it. We had a specific point of view for Megalith. We thought to ourselves, we've got this team. This is insane. This will never happen on a timely schedule. What if we did it the other way? What if we spared no expense? What if we spared no time? And we said, just what happens if you build a book without any of the constraints of publishing? So Lewis has been drawing this for 5 years. Every page is like a masterpiece. I've never seen a comic book ever like this. The best comic books I've ever seen, Lewis is approaching that on every single page. And we've got Laura Martin, who is the best colorist in the history of the business. She agreed to color it. She's painstaking. What's great is that she saw the pages and she's like, "Oh, I need to step up." She said this to us. We were like, "Well, how? You're literally the best ever." And she's like, "Let me try some things I've never tried before." And she's doing things that I didn't even know you could do with color theory, and they're working. We brought Taylor Esposito on board. He's he won the Ringo for best letterer this year, and he's lettering it. And Matt Kint wrote it. Matt's amazing. And then we went to the printer and we said, "Okay, now you guys need to step up." And we talked to them, and we found that there was this printing press that comics never gets to use because it's too expensive, but it is de facto the best printing press in the world. It provides the best ink saturations, best detail, and you need special paper for it. We were able to secure that paper and time on that press. So I don't know how much people are going to actually care. I think you'll notice it, but we'll see. And then we thought to ourselves, well, this is irresponsible financially. Maybe a Kickstarter can help us do this. And the books are going to be in stores as well. So if people didn't back the Kickstarter and they missed it, the books
that was my next question, because you sold me already.
Yeah.
They're in stores, and we're going to do those. I told you I love Marvels. We're going to do this acetate covers, so that we can print the cover art without any trade dress. You can flip the trade dress over.
Yeah.
And the cardstock covers and really nice pay. And it'll be cool. It'll be, if you're a printing nerd, I don't know that people are, but I am.
I mean, I will say, Marvels was very important to me, again, a formative part of my life. So you got me there as well. So
okay, great. Then you'll love this.
Yeah.
And the story is awesome, man. The story is this big megalithic structure comes crashing into Baltimore from outer space. It avoided all of our capabilities to see it. People don't know what it is. It starts spouting all these drones. They tear up cars, trees, the pavement, and it starts 3D printing itself bigger. And the government sends 3 teams to try and figure out what it is and try and get inside and stop it. And one team goes in from the top through a helicopter, one team goes in the middle, and then a team goes in from the subway because it's crashed on the ground. And 2 teams die, and the 3rd team is the one that gets in because they bump into this subway cop. He's our protagonist. And then they've got to make their way to the top while this thing is 3D printing itself. And the last thing I'll tell you, so that you don't have any spoilers, is you find out what it's printing, and it's printing itself into a large megalith, kind of like what do you call those things? Like a big mecha, like a big robot. And it's because there's a bigger one coming, and we're meant to use this one to defend Earth. And then that's like the first 10 pages, and then the story goes from there. So it's just this really widescreen, insane science fiction story.
Is this a limited series, or is it going to be ongoing?
It's everything. We don't do any ongoings. It's a beginning, middle, end. So it is, in that regard, so you could call it a mini series. It's it's over 100 pages. And then if we want to come back to something, we do come back. We haven't done a sequel yet, but we think of everything in kind of almost like movie terms, complete narrative terms, nothing ongoing.
So it's just one issue then?
No. It's we don't. It's about 4 issues worth of content. We also have a bunch of. So the way Bad Idea works is every issue you get could be 25, 35, 45 pages of that main story in one issue, multiple issues, 3, 4, 5 issue stories. And then each issue also has an 8-page story that is a different story from a different creative team, often different world. And those are just bonuses. We like to experiment with those, bring people in that can't, that are huge names that aren't able to work for us consistently. They can chip away at something. And so for Megalith, we did 8 stories with 8 killer creative teams like Glenn Yu and James Harron and all these amazing Miko Soya and Thomas Giarello, Joe Quesada. All these people came in and did work on these short stories. That'll be fleshing out the world. That'll be in the hardcover too. The hardcover is about 300 pages. So it's about 300 pages of story.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Mike, do you have any more questions for this? Because otherwise I want to kind of segue into kind of the collecting atmosphere.
Well, I mean, if we're done with the origin story, and I've watched a lot of these, Rohan, that you and JP have done, these origin stories, and Dinesh might take the cake for the most interesting.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously we all here are big collectors.
Yeah.
You were on an episode with 2 Chainz. A lot of us have seen and your collection is obviously incredible. So the first 2 questions I want to ask you is, when did you start collecting at that level? And then 2, what do you keep that collection like at your house, or is it like in a safety deposit box? That's something I always ask, because like I'm very curious, like, do you enjoy these on a daily basis, or is it like, oh, I got to go visit the safety deposit box to go see these things?
All right, so let me tackle them both. So I didn't have any books like this until very recently, 2018, the exact time that I was thrown out of Valiant. So I get pushed out of Valiant. I have this giant Valiant-shaped hole in my heart. I'm starting a new company, but it's not a happy time. At least I didn't think I was happy. Looking back, I mean, it's the American dream, right? You get a bunch of money, and you get freedom to do whatever you want, and you can start from scratch, and you get to live your life. And so I was trying to fill this Valiant-shaped hole in my heart, and I thought, well, I'll buy 1 or 2 of the books that I always wanted. And I bought like an X-Men 150, which I think was $5,000 at that time, $5,500. And I was like, this is awesome. And a couple weeks later, I was like, I want to upgrade. Let me get a 7.0. It's like $8,000. I can afford it. I made a bunch of money just now. And these things are, they're not bad investments. And so I buy an 8.0, and then I buy an 8.5, and then I don't sell them. I keep thinking I'll sell the previous one, and I don't sell the previous one. And then I start thinking to myself, well, I want an Avengers one, and I kind of want a Hulk, and I just start buying more and more. And then it becomes this like slippery slope, especially because I just come into a little bit of money. And then I bought I bought this apartment, and my wife is wonderful, and we had this extra little room, this tiny little thing that was meant to be a wine cellar or something, I guess, a wine room. The person that built the house never lived in it, didn't convert it into that. She said, why don't you make this a comic book room? So I've got this room, and I can put comic books up. I built shelving in it, lighting in it. So then I was like, I got to fill this out. People would come over and be like, well, you're missing this and missing that. I got angry. I was like, well, fuck it. I'm going to buy everything anyone could come in here and say you're missing. Next thing I know, I've got this big collection. Pandemic happens. Just around the time, I'm like, what have I done? I got to sell these things. This is too much money. This is ridiculous. Pandemic happens. Everything goes up in value. And I'm like, I'm a genius. I should have bought more. Why didn't I buy more? But no, most of it doesn't stay here. I do, when I have people over, I'll sometimes go get it. I have a gun safe, and a lot of it lives there, but the bigger stuff lives in the bank deposit box just down the street. And I do have quite healthy home owner's insurance. So I bring it here sometimes when it's especially valuable on the film and TV side, because this weird thing happens in the movie business is everybody wants to have a connection that is a true comic book fan. And so I suspect that I'm that for some people. And they come over and they see the stuff and they're like, oh, that's cool. And then later on I hear that they were like, oh yeah, well, my guy has this thing. What does your guy have? And I'm like, he said that about me? I didn't even know that he noticed. Really? Oh, that's weird.
They're taking down notes while they're walking around your room.
I will say it's fun that you said you start with X-Men 1. That's my kind of goal next book is an X-Men 1. Obviously, not a 5.0, but it'll be something low.
There's no wrong with an X-Men 1.
Yeah,
I'm saying it's really the only book I really have on my list at this point.
Yeah.
Undervalued. You got that Deadpool movie coming up. At some point, Marvel will do the X-Men. It's just
So Mike and I were talking before you jumped on, before we went live. Some of these books you have, we're very curious how one acquires, because there's some of the stuff you have is just you don't see, right? And so 3 that I specifically am curious to know, like, what's the story of how you got it? Obviously, I'm not asking you prices or anything like that. That's your own business. But I'm curious the stories of one, the motion picture funnies, number one. The only other one I've seen is a purple label. So, and yours is a blue label, correct?
It's blue, yeah.
Yep. The first proof of TMNT1.
Yeah.
And then the ASM 300 OA cover.
It's such a boring. These are such boring. The motion picture one might be fun. The answer is so boring. I buy all these things in auction.
Okay.
Heritage, Comic Link, Comic Connect. Not so much Hake. I haven't gotten into using them. Prop Store actually has some great stuff because it's all prop fans and they ignore all the comic book stuff. So generally, you're paying fair prices, but you're not. If it's something unique, you're not worrying about competing with someone that's going to pay more than a fair price. And the eBay sometimes. And then what happened is I started buying these things and I had a bigger and better collection, and they would call you because there's only so many idiots in the world willing to spend this kind of money. So those auction houses call you and they say, well, we've got this thing, we've got a buyer, he doesn't want to put an auction. We can put a deal together for you. And then other dealers start hearing about this. They're like, oh, there's a new idiot with a bag of money that I can sell to. Great, let me get his info. And so people call you and cold email. And so books come that way. But the Turtles proof I had, so I told you that one of my stupid things that I was doing was I wanted everything in that room that anyone could legitimately say is missing and should be in that room was of the same quality as everything else. If you say something lesser, I don't care. But there were things as a collector, I should have that. Let me get a copy. Turtles 1 I couldn't get because I stupidly made the shelving regular CGC size. Turtles 1 is slightly larger, so I couldn't put it anywhere. And then I hated the book because of it. But everyone would come in and say, "Where's Turtles 1? Why don't you have Turtles 1?" And so it's an expensive book. And then I was watching this auction for something else, and I saw Turtles 1 proof come up, and I thought, well, maybe I could get that, and that'll be my answer. Here, I have this thing, so I bought that. You can see what I think I paid like $8,000 for it.
$8,000?
Oh my god!
And at the time I was like, I don't know if that wasn't expensive or not for you, but I thought to myself, I'm spending $8,000. I didn't even really understand what this thing is. Working in publishing, I know what a printer's proof is. It's clearly a printer's proof. You don't make these things unless you're doing the book. So it's from the era. I love the cover. It was this disgusting handwritten intros. The staples were bleeding out. The ugliest book I've ever seen in my life.
And there's two of them, right?
I didn't know that time. There's two of them. There's three. Sorry, two. That's right, two. Eastman had one. Laird had one. One of them gave theirs to a store. I think Eastman gave his to a store, and that's the one that I've got. That store sold it. I paid $8 because it was an auction. I figured that someone else wanted to pay $8. That's somewhat market data. Sorry, you can say, Mike?
No, I was gonna say, I don't know where you're located. I'm in New England, and they publish Ninja Turtles down the street from me. Literally, I'm in Western Massachusetts. We're out studios. Yep. And we're filthy with Ninja Turtles out here. We find them all the time. I found that third print behind me there over my shoulder in an antique store for like $100. Like they're everywhere. We find them all the time. We find these things.
Oh, wow.
That's what I mean. I'm almost jealous that like that print didn't pop up in New England, or maybe it did originally. Who knows? But those guys, Eastman and Laird, will show up like randomly at comic book shows and like pop in as a surprise because they live in the area. So I was just amazed that you got a hold of it. I figured that'd be something someone around here would have. But
it's so irresponsible that I own it because I'm not even that big. I'm not a Turtles fan really. I like the cartoons and the toys, and there are people are Turtles fans, and they covet this thing, and I just got it to shut up the Turtles fans that I know. At some point, I do feel a burden of like I've got to find the right person, and then figure out how to get it to them.
Well, if you want to consider Mike or I in this,
I will say I'm about 2 years too old. I said the same thing when I grabbed this book. It's a New England thing for me. It's a local, I like the connection, but that was something like my little cousins were into. I wasn't a huge Ninja Turtle fan. I felt the same thing.
Screw Mike. I'm a Ninja Turtles guy. I would love consideration in this proposal here.
We should hold some kind of prove you're the biggest Turtles fan contest.
I love it. I love it.
But that's how I got it. I don't know why all the Turtles fans missed it. Maybe because it was a Comic Connect auction instead of Heritage or something. Okay. It was later in the auction. Maybe they didn't promote it. So that was that.
So real quick, I was going to say, basically, so we actually last week interviewed Vince from Comic Connect, and it's our episode that comes out. So we were talking about like, I'm one of the few idiots that'll spend money. It's like he talked about this. He's like, when these things come in, he's like, I'm making phone calls, and
8 idiots, or I don't know, 80. I don't know how many. Actually, I think there's a lot more than people think.
Yeah, that's what he says. He's like there is no shortage of these as you say, idiots.
When I have a Tech 27, which I'm very happy that I have. When I got that, I had a bunch of people reach out and saying, "Hey, I want to put you in touch. Someone wants to meet you. Someone wants to talk to you." And I'm like, "Why?" I think one was a famous TV presenter from England, and I was like, "Why? He doesn't know me." And he's like, "Well, he wants to talk to you." So I got on the phone with him. I got on a Zoom with him, and he was like, "Hey, you're in the club. I got a Tech 27." I'm like, "There's a club? There's like a weird Illuminati club." And I've had like 5 people reach out and be like, "Hey, you're one of the new members, right?" It's like,
that's kind of funny. So another good friend of the show, his name's Manu. He's of the 9.9 newsstand.
Oh, I know that guy. He's great.
Yeah. And so he said that you reached out to him when he got his Ultimate Fallout 4 newsstand 9.8. He's like, you wouldn't understand like the amount of people that have reached out to me to talk to me. And he mentioned that was actually the first time I learned of you. He was like, "Do you know who Dinesh is?" And I was like, "No, I don't." And then that's where I kind of got to know who you were.
I stole that from Tech 27. I was like, well, I could do this for, what do I like? I like Ultimate Fallout 4 and newsstand. There's not that many. Every time there's someone, I reach out and I go, "Hey, just so you know, this is awesome. Congrats. Don't get scammed out of it. It's people that are going to try and cheat you. It's worth this much money at least. And just congrats, man. It's an awesome book." Nice. Amazing Spider-Man 300, another boring story. I was on Heritage. I was making, so right after Valiant, I started working on Bad Idea. And at Valiant, I was producing. The way I set the deals up is Valiant had a designee to produce the movies. And the board decided who that designee was. It's an arm's length deal. It didn't have to be me. And the board kept choosing me. I was CEO of the company, chief creative officer, and I have a film background. Okay, I'm producing this thing. The minute I get pushed out, I understand it's not going to be me. They changed it that day. The executive I was working with, Sony, called in tears, like, "There's nothing I can do. I tried to keep you on. There's nothing I can. It's legal." I said, No, it's fine. I understand." She's like, "You're not upset." I said, "Well, I'm upset, but I expected it." And then 3 weeks later, I'm back on the movie because the writer and the director, Eric Heiser and Dave Wilson, Eric, who got nominated for an Academy Award, called the studio and they said, Eric said, "I will do," I don't know if he's ever said this publicly. I'm going to out him now. "You guys have been trying to get me to do rewrites on the movie. I will do all the rewrites you want. I will do production rewrites. I will do it all for free." And they were like, "What? Why?" One catch, you got to put Dinesh back on the movie as a producer. And they were like, "All right, great. I love a gangster move." So they called Valiant. They were like, "This guy's on the movie. He's working for us now." So they called me and they hired me for Sony. So I'm producing Bloodshot in South Africa with Vin Diesel and Guy Pearce. It's amazing. Asa Gonzalez. We're making this giant movie, $100 million movie. It's awesome. And at night, I'm like, it's very stressful. I'm trying to de-stress. So I'm on my laptop. I'm just going down Heritage, looking at all the different things. And they have this function where you can make an offer for certain pieces that have sold in the past. And I would just go through and I would make offers to all sorts of stuff. And you would get, I think I made, all told in that 8-month span, I made like 1,000 offers. I think I got 4 responses and I was able to buy 2 things. And one of them was Amazing Spider-Man 300. So I made an offer. The guy came back at double my offer. And it was still, I thought, very fair, very, very fair offer, maybe even under market. And I just said yes immediately. And then it's been in my possession and people come over. It's the thing that, of everything that I have, when people come over and they see it, it's the thing that stops them in their tracks. All the books, they go, "Wow, these are cool. I've seen a copy of Lower Grade. I had one of these when I was a kid." And then they see that thing and their brain shuts down. Sometimes they start yelling at my wife, "Do you know this should be in a museum?" Like in the end, "This should be in a museum." She's like, I don't know what that is, but he agrees. Dinesh agrees. It is in a museum now. It's at the
Kansas City thing. I was just telling Mike this. Yeah. I hope. Do you know if that exhibit travels? Because I would love if that came up to Seattle.
It was in Charlotte, and now it's in Kansas City, and it's going to move again. I think they don't tell me until it's official, but I believe it's moving again, so it's going to keep going.
Yeah, I hope it comes somewhere up in the Northwest. I'm up in the Seattle area, and I would love to, because I talked to someone that went to it in Kansas, and obviously that piece is there, and they were like, "There's so much OA there. It's just incredible."
Yeah. The best. There's a Larson triple cover. That's the best thing there. I think it's incredible. But there's a ton of cool stuff there. Wow. The motion picture funnies. I had everything that anyone would say should be in this room, but I realized the thing that I actually wanted the most was motion picture funnies. I'd read an article about it, and just like the lore of it really.
Well, Mike had not heard about it until I told him before we got on here.
I knew Human Torch was somewhere earlier, but I wasn't sure what the name of it was. Or
Submariner.
Sorry, Submariner. Yeah. So yeah, no, that's crazy. And I was trying to look it up furiously when before you jumped on. Yeah, no, it's amazing.
It's an amazing book. It's so much lore. It's the same editor as the first DC comic book and Marvel Comics 1. So it's this Lloyd Jaquette, this amazing a comics figure that nobody talks about. It's this amazing book. There's only 7 copies, 5 Blue Label, 2 restored. They all came from his estate. And I'd never seen one. I'd never ever come across anyone that owned one. And so I put a bounty up. I said, I think it was like $500. I said, if anyone can get me the information of someone that I can prove has a copy, whether I'm able to convince them to sell to me or not, I'll give you $500. I just want to know where they are. And I got so many people reaching out, and none of them turned out to be true. All people just trying to pretend they had it. And my buddy, Mike Hansen, who goes by Exatari, big collector, awesome dude, he found somebody that had one. And this guy was like, I'm not ready to sell. Don't put me in touch with your buddy. And then 3 or 4 years, maybe it's 2 or 3 years later, he finally called Mike and he said, okay, I'm ready to sell to your buddy. Here's my number. It's my kid's going to college now, and I need to help with that. So here's my number. And I paid him the number, and he sent me the book in the mail, and which was frightening. And then I got it, and it's amazing.
Was it raw or graded at that point?
It was graded. I think every one of those copies is graded at the same time. So it's got older label. And it's brittle slightly brittle pages. It's 5.0. It's really clean and beautiful.
I can't believe it's 5.0.
Yeah,
it looks.
That's probably the most ridiculous part, honestly.
It's nuts. I mean, it's a beautiful, and it's not it's a weird shape. It's not comic book size. It's slightly bigger and slightly wider. Yeah, it's awesome. It's amazing.
In my defense, Rohan, it's because this card right here lied. It said Marvel Comics #1, and then the Series 3 called my bluff right there on the back. Motion Picture Funnies Weekly #1. So that's why I like the second set better, right? Because the other one proved me wrong.
In between.
Doesn't CGC still say Marvel Comics 1 is the first appearance?
If you get older labels, it says Marvel Comics 1 says first Namor and Human Torch, but now, and of the last few generations, they say first newsstand reprinting of Namor, first appearance of Human Torch.
Got it.
Huh. They do clarify now.
I will tell you, Dinesh, if you put out a similar bounty, I know where one of the purple copies is. If you want to, so
yeah, I don't know. I can't be like Thanos and collect them all. That's
well, there's only 7, so
there are only 7. That isn't. Yeah, I thought about that.
Wow.
Okay, so then here's my question for you. You've got all this room that has anything anyone could want or ask or talk about.
Here it comes.
The hypothetical situation is you store all of them at your house.
Okay.
House is on fire. You can only grab 3 pieces
after saving the family, right? I mean, it's got
yes. Absolutely, of course.
Motion pictures is definitely #1.
#1. Wow.
Okay. That's. I feel like I have I'm a guardian of that. That's a cultural artifact. There's not many of them. It really does belong in a museum. I think they will all be in museums at some point. The second one would be, I have an Action 1 and a Tech 27, so those 2 for financial reasons. Sometimes I get lambasted for this, but I think it's irresponsible not to consider the financial implications of these things at this point, right? When they become so valuable, people will say, well, buy it because you love it. Sure, but if you've got kids and a wife, or you're taking care of your parents or step-parents or just your brother, sister, you have to be thinking about what your financial situation looks like. You never know if you're going to be in a situation where you need to sell something or whether you're going to need cash and you're not going to want to sell this. So you have to make, as with anything, you're buying a sports car, whatever you're buying, you have to be financially, what's the word I'm looking for? You have to forecast financially. You've got to think about what your situation is going to be like. So I try and think about those things when I buy things, especially now. A lot of the stuff that I bought wasn't the price it is now when I bought it. I don't know that I would have bought it. As much as I love it, it is a little frightening to have this much value stored in comic books and art, because they're. I mean, you could argue there's a fire, it'd be awful. Now a lot of it isn't here, and I do have fireproof safes and stuff that is here, but it's a little scary.
You do have. So there wasn't an Action 1 in that 2 Chainz episode, at least in the video I've seen. So you do have one of the.
They didn't want it. They didn't want me to bring it.
Interesting, but so you do have that then, obviously.
I showed them. They had me bring a Mark Jewelers 9.8 newsstand Uncanny 266, and I was like, I have the original cover, and they're like, nah. Really? No, nah. Bring the book. Book's worth a couple grand. This cover's worth a lot. And they're like, nah. Bring the book.
Oh, come on.
Wow.
Yeah, so they picked the books.
So then the next question would be, what is there anything left to hunt down for you?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's always stuff. I'm especially with original art. My love has moved to original art, because for me, I think a lot of people feel this way. I'm curious if you guys do. The hunt is the best part.
100%. Yeah. We can talk. Yeah, go ahead. We'll elaborate on this.
Dollar boxes, if you're finding something, is just as exciting as if you source something that's incredibly valuable, right? It's the same endorphin hit, and original art is that way because it's all one of one. You're never going to get another chance to buy it. Probably you're never going to see it again. It's amazing to just see the thing in black and white, even if you don't get a chance to own it. But getting it in your hands and understanding that the artist labored over this thing. This was the board that I went to. I've got a Jim Lee piece that I got in recently, and I happened to be at his house for an event. That makes me sound very elitist. I don't know why I got invited. I was definitely not part of the circle that should have been there, but I happened to be there, and with my wife, and I kept looking at Jim Lee. I kept looking, and she's like, "You're like stalking this guy with your eyes." And I'm like, "It's fucking Jim Lee." She's gonna go talk to him. So she goes talks to him, then brings me over and says, "You work in comics too?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Do you know he works in comics? Yes, I know Jim Lee works in comics. And he's like, "Wait, are you Dinesh, the art collector?" And I was like, "Oh, he knows who I am. That's cool." And he goes, "Do you want to see some art?" I was like, "Yeah." So he takes me upstairs, out of the party, upstairs, and he doesn't have any art. He's like, "Oh, I guess there's none in my office." Meanwhile, I'm looking at his drawing board, his art board. And he's looking at me funny. I'm like, "Can I go look at the art board?" And he goes, "Yeah, sure." And it's literally a half step away from me. So we're standing here, and I just walk over here, and I'm standing. He's right there. And I'm like, I'm looking at this thing, and then I realize I look so weird. Do I look longer? Do I stop? And it'd been like 2 minutes, and I look over, and he's looking at me like, "What's wrong with you?"
What was on the art board?
Nothing. It's just an art board. It's just.
I think you're saying it was something I was working on.
That is a little weird. Yeah.
But I'm like, this is where Jim Lee sits and he draws. Is this the one from way back? Is this new?
Do you draw X-Men 1 here? Like, yeah.
Did you draw some 1 here? And I wanted to ask, but then when I turned around, he was looking at me like, "Are you gonna murder me, kid? Are you gonna like steal my teeth and make a necklace or something?" But I love that about art. I love that I've got a piece from Valiant, Shadow Man 1 cover, and there's a big coffee stain all over it, and it's all crumpled up. It's got creases. And I asked David Lapham, who drew it, I said, "I have this cover. What's the story?" And he goes, "Man, I was penciling that thing, and I started to ink it, and I spilled my coffee, and I got so upset, and I crumpled it up, I threw it away, and then someone brought it over, and we light boxed it." And he's like, "I don't know how you got that because I put it back in the bin." He said, "Someone must have taken it out of the bin."
Yeah.
I just love that. He's like, "I'd love a photo. I haven't seen that in forever." And I took a photo, I sent him. He's like, this looks awful. Why do you want this thing? It's disgusting. I mean, it's got coffee. It's all crunched up.
It's amazing, these stories about, like, so we had, there's a guy named Fausto. He's the lead Marvel card consultant at CGC.
Oh,
Huge Silver Surfer collector like myself. And so we had him on, and he's shown us all this crazy stuff. And he has, if you remember the Series 1, 1990, they had 5 holograms.
Yeah.
And there's a Silver Surfer hologram.
Yeah.
And he pulls out the printing plate they used to make that hologram. So nowadays in modern sets, they actually will insert printing plates in the cards. They're very rare to come by, but you can get them. Yeah.
Can you tell the weight? That feels like
it's like an actual like aluminum plate, and it has a sticker on the back that says congratulations, you got a 1 of 1.
No, but I mean, before you open a pack, can you tell that it's a little heavier?
I don't know. I mean, it's aluminum and it's pretty thin. I'm not 100% sure. Okay. But anyway, so in that set, though, that was not a thing. That didn't happen until like 2016. And he's like, whoever worked at the factory where this was made stole them. And I happened to find the Silver Surfer one on like eBay. And it's just like, it's so crazy to hear about these things. Yeah.
Does it look cool? I bet it looks amazing.
Well, it's essentially, if you remember that card, it has the hologram and it has a white border.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it just looks like the hologram with no border. So it just looks like one solid hologram that's uncut, kind of. It's awesome. Yeah. But then I was going to talk about, like, so Mike, myself, and then JP, who's the other co-host with me. Like you said, the hunt is the best part. Like, the 3 of us, like, I don't know, the last couple of, like, there isn't a book that we go after, consider to buy, that we don't like ping the 3 of us to like discuss it first.
Constantly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a cool hobby to share as well. I've got a Telegram group with about 20 guys, and it's just it makes it so much more fun.
Yeah.
That's me again. Being, I've been a long time comic collector, but one of the reasons I started my channel was I had no one to talk about it with. Like I only had one friend growing up who was into them, so for me it was an outlet. Like I just want to talk about these to the ether, to the world. But I've made so many real life friends through this, and like people I've never physically met. But like Rohan, like we're like talking constantly, and this is true for like 10 other people. There's no other community like that. I feel like where it's because of that childhood connection we all have. And we hold on to that, no matter what the level you have crazy comic books, but like we could all sit here and talk about silly Marvel cards have that connection. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really, really good people. Also, I don't find as much jealousy or like petness. People are good about sharing.
People are happy for each other. Yeah,
this is I think one of the best parts about the community is like there is honestly, I mean, obviously there probably are, but there's no real like when Mike gets something, like Mike had a huge score. He found Hulk 181 in a basement. Right. And like we're celebrating, like Mike calls, he's like, I got to talk to somebody. He calls me on the phone. And we're like, so I mean, it's great. Like it's as fun as when I got my Hulk 181. It's great.
I called 5 people that night just because I had the adrenaline was so high, I couldn't believe it. And and it was great to have your boys, like I had guys to talk to. And 7 months ago before I started my channel, I don't know what I would have done. I would explain it to my wife, and she's like, "How much did you spend?" Like it doesn't have the same impact,
Yeah.
Wait, how did you find this in the basement? What was it? Someone that?
Long story short, I found this guy. It's a mile from my house. He was having a yard sale. He had comic books. This was last fall. I called him up, like, "What kind of comic books you have?" He's like, "Come on over." And he had a whole bunch of stuff in the '80s, but good stuff. And when I asked him how much, he's like, 50 cents each. And I looked at him. I said, "No way." And I handed him a $100 bill. I'm like, he had Secret Wars 8 in there. First Mr. Sinister. Not like crazy books, but like it's worth a lot more. And he was so surprised by my honesty. I bought like 800 comic books from him really cheap. Long story short, he said he had better comic books in his basement. He had to go through them. So out of the blue, he called me a few weeks ago. Hey, come over and we'll look at those comic books. And they were all Silver Age and Bronze Age. And I smelt it coming, man. I found like the 70s Hulks. Like he's going to have this damn book. Flipped it over. It was right there. And I was honest. He had no idea. He said he would have sold it to me for $50. And I told him right flat out. I was like, nope, this is thousands of dollars. And because I'm helping him appraise the collection, helping him sell it, he sold it to me really cheap. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's comic karma. That's very cool.
Karma, man. Yeah, he kept going on about karma, like the fact that
he scored Hulk 181, Fantastic Four 48, and ASM 50, right, Mike?
Yeah. The ASM 50 is to be. You can't see it with the glare, but yeah, ASM 50. and that's nothing. Like the books he has is incredible. I was there to help him sell, not buy. But there's some books on the list. I'm like, listen, I'm gonna pay you whatever you want for these because I need them in my collection. But yeah, and it's fun. Like it's fun too. The perspective is fun to talk to a guy who got them off the shelf. Like we weren't around in the 60s to have him like, he knew who the characters were. He's like, oh yeah, Wolverine and Hulk, that's classic. He had no concept of price, which is refreshing to be like, see him be excited about a comic book and not realize like how much money it is, That was cool. It's fun to talk to these guys.
Were they his dads or someone like that?
No, they were his. He's an older guy. He's like retired and he bought them all.
Buying them, but he hadn't kept up with what they were worth or the collection.
He was collecting and reading all the way through the 80s. He loved indie stuff most of all and weird stuff, but he put them away and never looked at them again. So
and Dinesh, you can look up Mike's video, but like they're in these like, I don't know what bags are those. They're not. There's no boards.
They're the old like bags that I've seen them before, and they're like flimsy and they get covered in like that sticky dust you get. I mean, these were like. They were like they're ripping like so many people were on me in the comments and I felt bad because like I knew it. Everyone's like, you're not holding them correctly. And I'm like, yeah, I know, because it's like they're glued together. There's no dainty way to do this while I'm filming, so but yeah, it was an experience. When I was, when I joke in the video, my first reaction wasn't so much that dopamine hit. I actually groaned because I knew his collection was going to be a lot more difficult. Like I have to pay attention now, it became a lot bigger thing. Yeah. And I wasn't really anticipating ending up with it. So the adrenaline kind of kicked in later when I realized it was going to happen. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's a great.
But it's a hunt, man. Like that's the story. It was the story is better than the book in some ways. Then you get the book, you're like, I'm happy I have it. But that experience is what I'm always going to talk about.
That copy of Hulk 181 now is incredibly special to you because it has that story imbued in it. And that's amazing.
Exactly. And those are things like I talk about this all the time. People are like, what would you ever sell your stuff? And I'm like, there is too many things that I have a personal attachment, like personal attachment, not just like I really wanted it. Like I have a story from my life, attached to this thing. It's difficult. So, it's probably a forever kind of book.
Yeah. Awesome. As it should be. Give it to your kids.
I have 2 kids. Yeah. Then I'll leave it for them. That's why they're going to end up with a lot of comic books they probably won't care about, but they can get rid of it. I just don't want to see it. I'll be long gone by then, hopefully. So.
Well, they can call Rohan and he can help them sell it. I mean,
exactly.
I hope you
no, I mean, I think my thing, I both have that. Like, I have young kids as well, and it's like my hope is one of them gets into it, because I would love to pass them down versus having. I mean, if none of my 3 kids get into it, when we're retired, we'll sell them, and the wife and I will go on a nice vacation. But otherwise, my hope is that one of them gets into it, and it's like a legacy thing that you can pass down. What about you?
I'm very clear to my kids, and I'm curious, Rowan, if you ever do this, I have to be point out, like, collectibles are dumb. Like, I say it to my son all the time, like, look, I got this great deal. I'm like, you realize how silly that is? That's how much this is paper. Because it's as great as it is to us and what we think about it, like, when you're trying to teach a kid, like, values, like the fire. If there's a fire, man, like, you save yourself. You save the animals, like, save your life. Like, these don't actually matter that much. You have to kind of both get them excited about them, but also understand the money you're talking about is kind of silly in the grand scheme of things. First world problems that we have and all. So, yeah.
Dinesh, what is your legacy story with your collection? Do you have kids that you hope to pass them down to?
I've got 3 kids. They're very young, 5, 3, and 1. So I don't know yet if they're going to be into it or not. They do know who Spider-Man is, so they'll sometimes see a Spider-Man book and they'll point and they'll say Spider-Man, and they know that those are Daddy's books. They don't understand why they keep asking me to open the cases. Like my youngest, will be like, open, read, open. I'm like, no, I'm not opening and reading this.
Understandable question. Yeah.
I've actually been really excited lately. So I have a 5-year-old boy and I have twin 3-year-old girls, and my 3-year-old girls have recently become obsessed with Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, the animated cartoon. Yeah. And so it's like, it gets me excited because every morning when they wake up, when I start work, my wife is, getting ready. They'll watch that to kind of pass the time, and I love it.
And they like it at 3. I should show it to mine.
Yeah, they love. I mean, they wake up every morning and they come in and they go, "Can we watch Small Spider-Man?" And go and put it on for them. They watch for about 20 minutes before they, their day starts.
I think it's interesting. My son just turned 11, and he, in my videos, he goes to comic shows with me. He likes just palling around with me, right? He knows all the characters, of course. Yeah. And he has a little collection, but it's funny. You also want them to be their own person. Yeah. And I see him gravitate. He's always like Pokemon cards. Now he's into Magic cards, and he's going down that rabbit hole. And I don't want to discourage him. Like, I think those things are cool too. So you want them to like the same things as you, but I don't want to be like, make them go. You're gonna read this comic book and you're gonna like it. You want them to be their own person. I hope, you hope that they'll find the same things that you like, but you also kind of want to watch them grow to their own person. It's
that whole generation, though. I've got friends that have 11, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. They're all like obsessed with Magic and Pokemon. That's their. Yeah.
On that, so you guys have heard this One Ring to Rule Them All story?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I just thought about that because you said you put a bounty on the motion pictures. Like, that bounty got up to like what, $3 million?
Something like that. Who ended up getting it? It was like David. It was some dealer, right?
I don't know who got it. I just know that when it was revealed, it was already graded by PSA. Yeah. And like, I know, so there's several card grading companies, and Beckett is one of them. And they had said, hey, if you grade it with us, we're going to do all this extra blah, 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 blah.
I didn't know
that. But then whoever did pull it decided to just quietly sent it to, got with PSA, because when it was revealed last week or whatever, it was already graded PSA 9.
They didn't go to Beckett.
No.
Oh, that's too bad.
Surprised everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they did announce that the owner, it's some card dealer that found the fan that pulled it and then made a deal. No one knows how much money.
Well, I know, I think Post Malone, the musician, put I think his bounty was $2.5 million or something like that.
Holy shit, really?
Yeah.
But I think it went all the way up to 3 million. Someone in Europe said 3 million.
I grew up with Magic cards. God, talk about, people complain about selling their comic collections when they were young. I had my Magic cards from when I got into them when it started. We'd be having a different conversation now. I started and stopped many times. I'm happy my son's into them. Pokemon cards are cool, but then as he gets older, I want something more advanced. Yu-Gi-Oh! He gets into Magic. He's really into it. But we also like Lord of the Rings. So when that set came out, we've been doing some drafts down the street. Haven't played in years. It's kind of fun. But just seeing what the prices have done, because they do that. And I think you guys might have talked about this, Dinesh. I don't know if I know Swaggle has brought it up at one point. If seeing how successful Wizards of the Coast was with this idea of having a one of one or a limited thing, how long before DC and Marvel start doing the bagged comic books again?
The Marvel card world has one of ones. They've had them for a bit now.
Right. But now they have the publicity attached to this. They see the money, the dollar signs. I think you're going to see a lot more of this stuff, these kind of gimmicks going on.
We did it twice at Valiant. We did a Quantum and Woody book, where we printed one copy of the book, and then every other copy was a second print. So it was a book that wasn't available to fans except for a second print because it's a comedy book. And then we did another one that was a one copy of a Bloodshot book in conjunction with the movie. Vin Diesel does this charity thing every year called Game for Paul. It's a Paul Walker Foundation, and they raise a bunch of money for natural disasters. And they asked us to support. So we built a one-of-one comic book that he signed, and they put it out there. It went for like $50,000, I think.
Wow.
It's a lot of money.
I mean, the one thing for us, we joke about these one-of-one special gimmicks, but we're just talking about original art. Like, it's one-of-one, no matter what it is. It's one-of-one. You know, like something to be said for that.
Yeah, you're right. So our industry, comics already has it in spades in original art.
Right.
But yeah, I absolutely think probably Marvel will be the ones that do blind bags with a one-of-one.
Yeah.
Also, the theme, the narrative connection to the One Ring is really, that's a delicious component.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Does it? Hopefully, they find a cool narrative way in.
Yeah. Actually, real quick, I do want to ask Dinesh. You know, we talked about your ASM 300. What other cool OA pieces do you have?
I have got the ones that I'm excited about that people tend to get excited about. I've got the Uncanny 266 cover.
Yeah.
That's the Gamut cover. I've got the Vengeance of Bane painted cover. Man of Steel 18, which is the first Doomsday. I've got the trade paperback from Death Suit Man, which I read that thing a billion times. Age of Apocalypse, Joe Mad, the double wraparound cover. I've got a bunch of interior art. I've got a page from X-Men 1.
Oh, wow.
I've got the first page Daredevil appears on from Daredevil 1. I've got a page from Avengers 1.
Nice.
Yeah, I went a little nuts with the art.
I would just like one day just love to like come to your house for and just like look.
You can
the museum. Yeah.
I
have one piece of original art. I was talking to Rohan. I can see myself getting into it. I made a connection. Do you like Neil Adams?
Love Neil Adams. Yeah. Okay,
we should talk later. I might have some connection there, back in connection. But the only piece I own is this one over here. Michael Dooney gave me this as a gift. He's worked for Mirage Studios, along with Lara Neesman and stuff. And I wasn't really into it. I was like, I was happy he gave it to me as a gift. I never thought I'd be into original art until I held it and I brought it home. I'm like, damn, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I'm getting excited now thinking about like what else could I get, So
I have three pieces of original and my character. So I have two of them are animated sketches, like so X-Men, the animated series, a sketch that they use in one of the episodes.
Awesome.
And then another one from the Batman animated series. And these things they're cheap. Like I've got them in the last couple of weeks and they're dirt cheap. I don't understand how they're this cheap. And then I have a Ron Lim Silver Surfer sketch card that he did.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
original art is great. It doesn't have to be expensive. There are certain pieces that are, but there's lots of stuff that's equally cool and equally exciting. The original art hobby hasn't crystallized in the same way comics have yet, and I know a lot of big comic collectors are starting to move into original art. So I think over the next maybe 5 years it will crystallize. Yeah. Also, the museums and things help because people come and they see them and they go, "Wow, this is really cool. I didn't know this stuff existed." Is what most people say.
Yeah,
I mean, I went to a show this summer where I couldn't believe how much original art they had. It was a huge move. It was in the big WickedCon in Boston, and I've just never seen it before. In all the shows I've ever been to, you can definitely see, you can feel like your fingers are on the pulse of like that paradigm shift. Everyone's like, this is the next best thing. I don't need these old comic books that have lots of copies on the census. I want the one-of-one, and it was pretty impressive. And there were people everywhere, just really into it. So it's neat. You can kind of feel it coming.
Another friend of the show, Lawrence of Mighty Comics and Collectibles, he talked about like a New York Comic Con. There's always a dealer there, and I don't remember the name. Is Ramita stuff, but all his stuff is all the Ramita Senior OA.
Ramita Man.
Okay, yeah, Ramita Man. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, he was very friendly with John Ramita Senior, who just passed away, and John Ramita Junior, and he bought a bunch of their art. He's an incredible collection, but he's a dealer. Yeah, he's got. What did he show me the other day? He showed me the page that Mary Jane first appears on from her cameo issue, and I was like, "This is insane. This is a cultural artifact again. Like, this is insane." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I just found this the other day." Doesn't remember what he has. He's a good dude.
Nice.
Is it that you hit the jackpot, Tiger? Like that one?
No, there's a guy named Thomas Fish who has that. I've been trying to get that off of him forever. He'll never.
That would be sick. That's a cool one.
Yeah. That one's incredible. Yeah, if you guys go to, there's a website called Comic Art Fans.
Yeah, I go there.
A lot of this stuff is on there, and it's just fun to see the original art like that.
Did you see? I have the email that they send, whether it's daily or every couple days.
Yeah.
And the one, was it yesterday or the day before? It was a Joe Shuster sketch of Superman, and I was like, that is something special.
I didn't see that. I missed that one. I got to go back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool. And again, the collectors it's all people that every one of these guys that collect original art started as books. Some of them that have been in the original art hobby for decades, I asked them, and they go, "Oh yeah, in the '80s I was collecting books. I had a big book collection, and then I bought some art, and then I sold some books to buy more art, and then I sold more books to buy more art, and then I sold all my books and I would buy art." It's weird. I wonder if it's inevitable.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder. I don't know.
It seems like a logical progression in a way.
Yeah.
But then where do you go? What happens next?
Vials of blood from the DNA of the actual artist.
Yeah, you buy his artboard, I guess.
Right.
That's where Marvel will go. They'll exhume Stanley's corpse and
fingernail clippings. And,
yeah. Well, Dinesh, this has been awesome. I mean,
we're gonna end there. That was a dark place to end.
Yeah.
That's where these inevitably go. If you've been on for an hour and a half,
Oh, is that your theme? Do you end on Stanley's corpse every time?
No, this is the first. Maybe it'd be a new tradition. Yeah.
This is funny. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rohan. I feel like I had some big shoes to fill with JP, but hey, I love just hanging out with comic book people.
At San Diego Comic Con?
What's that?
Are you going to be at San Diego Comic Con?
I was wanting to go, but now it probably will push off till next year. I'll also say too, like now with like a lot of the big studios like kind of backing out of it because of the strike or whatever, like it definitely isn't as appealing. But I definitely want to make it down if not this year, then next year.
Have you ever been?
No. I've only been to a couple cons up here in the Seattle area.
The studios backing out don't have an impact. No one gets to go to that stuff anyway. It's all Hall H. The floor is the same. It's awesome. There's tons of creators. If you do end up going down, or if you go down next year, Bad Idea throws a party every year. We do a big tiki party. This year it's Friday night. Let me know. You guys should come.
All right. Yeah. No. I mean, at some point, I'm definitely coming to San Diego Comic Con. So
it's on my bucket list. I'm just on all the other coasts, so it's sort of a big deal. But yeah, I'm gonna make it someday. So.
It's fun though, man, and it's also a mini vacation. Well, not even a mini; it's a vacation because it's sunny San Diego.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, we'll definitely have to do that. And we would also love to have you again down the line for another episode to talk about what's going on. So
yeah, please. Anytime you guys want, let me know.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it's been great. Thanks everybody for watching, listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, and have a good one, everyone.
Hey guys.